Hello everyone, welcome back and thanks for stopping by for another visit. A few things I want to talk about before we get into this is I watched a video of Rudy's Resurrection. That is a F100 Crown Vic conversion that a guy by the name of Fred is doing right now, and if you haven't caught his channel, I definitely recommend you visit him, Nathan's Garage, or River City if you're seriously thinking about doing this. Those three guys have detailed a lot of information on how to do these conversions, and they've been a huge help to watch their videos and learn from what they're doing. So anyway, I was watching one of Fred's videos. He just finished widening the bed of his truck by 5 inches, or was it 10? I think it was 10. And he brought up a good point. We're at a point with my truck, probably a similar point as him, where the big things are done. You know, the quick things to do are done, and now it's all the small details that have to be done. And that's why I haven't put a video out on the truck for quite a while. We're in the process of wiring the truck. It's not complete. The engine side of it, it's not complete. There's still a few more circuits to run. And I don't want to put the video out until after it's completed. I've got videotape on that going back probably 6 weeks ago we started on it. But we're moving around and doing different things as we feel a need to. We're in the middle of doing the fuel system. Right now we ran some fuel lines today and got the tank mounted, and we have to pull the tank back down just to connect the fuel lines to it. And what else are we working on? Some of the stuff under the hood we're working on, some of the little mounts for the power steering reservoir and the overflow bottle for the radiator. So a lot of little stuff is getting done, but not enough to compile a whole video for yet. Dan put together a list of things to do off the top of his head, and there's 28 items. There's 28 items on that list. And, you know, it's all small, tedious, detailed stuff that's time consuming. So we are working on the truck. Today's video is going to cover the gauge assembly, the gauges and the dash bezel. I finished that up this week and put it together, and it looks real good. So I think you're going to enjoy seeing that today. And definitely I'll be back putting some videos out on the truck as soon as I get, you know, a completed video. It's just, it's taking time, but we're sticking with it. I hope you stick around and watch the videos, and I hope you enjoy today's video. So let's get started with that. Thanks for coming by again. So here are my gauges. I ordered them from Dolphin. They're out of Florida. And they don't make a kit exactly like this. They have these smaller gauges that come with a 2, and I believe it's about a 3/8 inch speedometer. I really like the large speedometer in the center, so I asked him if I could get the 2 1/16 gauges for the water temp, volts, oil pressure, and fuel, and get the 5-inch speedometer. And for a minor upcharge, it was around $30. They were willing to do that for me. So I'm going to make a cherry bezel out of the cherry you see here. I'm going to make it to fit the flat portion of the bezel, and insert the gauges into the cherry wood, and then attach the wood to the face of the bezel. So I've settled on these two boards. I'm pretty happy with how they're going to look together. I've got them milled down about 3/4 inch. I'm going to glue them up, and then I'll take them down to about 3/8 inch in the planer. So this is my second attempt at a couple of boards. This is just a rough template I made of the bezel. And the first time I didn't have enough wood to fit this curved part in, so I decided to get a couple more boards and start over. So I'm kind of going to lay it out like this. My glue joint will be in the center, about in the center, which will be fine. Usually glue joints are pretty darn strong, and that'll give me a little bit of the grain on both sides of the gauges. All right, here we go. Here's the two boards glued up, and I just finished milling it down to about 5/16 of an inch. And we're going to start cutting the template, getting it to fit next, and then install the gauges. I've got the template done for the bezel, and I made it out of some heavier paper that I have. I'm now going to take that and transfer it onto this fiberboard that I have, and I'll work with this and get a real nice fit in there. And then once I'm happy with it, then I'll transfer that over to the cherry wood that I have. So I have the template roughed out, and now I'm going to sand it down to the lines, and we'll test fit it in a bit. So I have the template done, and I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. When I actually build that out of the cherry, the only thing I'm not sure of, because there is a curve in the bezel itself, you can see there, that I may end up cutting the cherry one into 3 pieces, kind of like that, and laying them down. But overall, pretty happy with how that fits. Got a good nice edge chrome around it, which is what I was looking for. And that bezel I bought off eBay just to have a practice one, because I didn't want to scratch up my one out of the truck because it's so nice. Almost hate cutting it up, but that day will come soon. So here's what I got to figure a workaround for. As you can see, the dash bezel is also curved that way. So what I did was I took my template here and I cut it into thirds. My thought is to use the factory holes to use some bolts to hold the center section on, like so. And then I will drill 4 holes per side for the outer wings and put some shims behind there, which I think with some shims behind there, it'll kind of line everything up, and should come out pretty decent looking. So I think once I have everything shimmed up from behind and tightened down, that it should look pretty good. So I'm gonna draw this out on my boards behind here, and use my templates and draw it out. The only thing I've got to keep in mind is to add just a little bit extra on each side to take into consideration the thickness of my blade in the table saw. So I also gave myself just a little bit of extra room. I'm going to cut out just a slightly larger than what I've drawn, and then I'll take it down on the sander to the exact size. Here I have the 3 pieces rough cut now, and I will run these through the saw and trim them up a little bit closer. I have the right side marked and the left side, because actually the two sides are different sizes. So let me get started on that. Here I have my 3 sections cut out, and with relieving some of the stress from the wood, I can see that some of it's twisting just a little bit. But I still think with a little bit of glue on the edge there and bolting those down in places that it'll hold pretty good, and hopefully clean that seam up, have it look pretty flush. So normally I don't use my table saw without the blade guard in place, but I really wanted to see those lines so I could come up close to where I wanted to be, and I think that went pretty good. And look, I still got 10 fingers. So I'm using my sander again to shape the pieces, and just want to show you a couple of them here. I'm really working on getting this gap at a very minimal, and what I'm finding is that this wood's a little bit thicker than my template was, and this bezel here is also angled. So what I did was I dropped the table here to cut an angle on that edge, as you can see here, so that I can get that right up and close up against the top of the bezel. Alright, so I just used some screws to screw in the center section so I can get the left and right side done. I think once I get some stainless screws in here and get this shimmed up a little bit, get the gauges in here, it's going to look pretty good. So here, I know it's a little hard to see, I've drawn out where my gauges are going to go. And I've marked off here where the stainless steel screws will go to hold this panel in place. That's going to be my center gauge. I raised the outside gauges just slightly over center from the center gauge just because I thought it looked a little bit better. The next thing I'm going to do is to drill the holes for the gauges and then use my sander to make them the size that they need to be. So here's where I'm at with the dash bezel. I used my sander, as you saw in the previous video, to round out the holes. I've since just set them in place for now, and took a marker and marked on the bezel where the gauges are going to lie. Did that in red just to make it a little bit more easy for me to see. So that's the area I've got to cut out to make room for the gauges. So I'm going to drill 4 holes in the corners, and then probably flip the bezel upside down and use my jigsaw and just connect the holes. So let me drill those holes and we'll get back in a short bit. So I'm going to drill this from the back side of the bezel. That'll give me a little bit more space for my jigsaw, which is a little bit larger one. I've got to re-drill these holes though. They're not quite big enough for the blade to fit into it. And I use these bits that my father acquired. He'll enjoy this. When he used to work at Inland Steel, he'd bring home packages of drill bits for himself to use, and I've still got a few laying around, so that's what I use still today. And he's been retired, oh geez, probably 25 years now. Here's what the bezel looks like right now. I've got the cherry wood bolted down to the bezel and just test fitting everything to see how it fits. On these corners for the outer two wings, I did have to shim those up a little bit because they were low relative to the center section. It still needs to be final sanded and finish. I'm either going to go with a gloss or a semi-gloss and then put everything back together at that point. So here's the bezel and the wood insert. On the bezel, as you can see, I tried to cut out the minimum that I could just to keep it as sturdy and rigid as possible. And I've got about 7 layers or 7 coats of wipe-on poly with a light sanding in between each coat on the cherry wood. And it has just a kind of a semi-gloss sheen, which is kind of what I wanted. So let's get this assembled and we'll see what it looks like when it's all done. So here are the gauges all assembled in the bezel, and pretty happy with how everything looks. I went with all stainless screws and washers so that they won't corrode, and I installed turn signal indicators and a high beam indicator also. So I can't wait to get that into the truck and see what that's going to look like. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed that video. I definitely enjoyed making the wood inlay for the gauges and the bezel, and I think it turned out real nice. The only changes I'm going to consider making is I went with Phillips head screws, and I think I'm going to purchase Allen head stainless steel screws instead. I think those will look a little bit nicer in there than what the Allen heads do, so I'm going to switch those out in the next few days. I'm going to pick them up. Other than that, the wood really matches up well with the steering wheel wood. It's a good color match, and I think it's going to look real good in the dash when I get it in there. So I hope you enjoyed that video. As always, thanks for stopping by for a visit with me, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Take care and stay safe. Take 2. It helps if you plug the microphone into the camera. You get a little bit better sound quality that way. At least that's what I'm learning. All right. Well, thanks for... Well, I hope you all enjoyed that video. I definitely enjoyed making that wood. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that video. I definitely enjoyed making the wood inlay for the gauges and the